Right, hello everyone, so today I want to talk about a very important topic, rating. And before we get into the real question, which is should you care about your rating or not, I want to bring up a small story the other day from one of my students. He was talking to me about potentially playing in this rapid tournament. It was like 25 plus 5 tournament. And in the US, apparently with some like rapid tournaments, it also impacts not only your rapid rating apparently, but your standard rating. So like my student, he was like, I'm not sure I want to play because of that, because it will, do something to my standard rating. But I'm like, dude, you're 1700 USCF. From what I've seen in our lessons, you're definitely much stronger than that. He is extremely underrated. So it's like, even if he does play in this tournament, he's probably going to gain like 100 points or something. And so this really brings us to the point of this video, right? Which if even my student, who's super underrated, is scared of playing these tournaments, I'm not sure scared is the word, he can perhaps correct me on that, but is showing some sort of restraint in playing the tournament because of his rating, and this guy's probably going to gain a ton from playing it. Imagine what everyone else feels and the concern they feel around their rating. I think that that's something to really discuss in this video. And so the usual answers that a lot of people will give you to this sort of question, should you care about your rating or not, they're going to be like, no, it's okay, you don't need to care about your rating, just focus on the process. As you naturally get stronger, your rating will increase. And while I think, people, when they say this, it comes from a place of good intention, ultimately, it's not very useful in a practical sense. And I mean, let's be real, if you've been spending like the last however many years you've been playing chess, obsessing over your rating, is someone telling you don't worry about your rating going to change that? Probably not. So while it might seem like my answer is going to be, yeah, you should care about your rating, that's part of the answer, but it's also not that black and white. Because when I was younger, and don't get me wrong, got pretty decent when I was younger, but I think I probably could have gotten better if I, at times turned this attitude down a little bit. I was always obsessed over my rating. And it was to the point where I couldn't see anything beyond the current game I was playing. I would only think about the here and now. How is this game I'm playing going to impact my rating right now? And to be honest, most players, whether they want to admit it or not, probably have, to some degree at least, this exact same attitude that I had when I was younger. But the problem with this is that, let's just take one single game. There is only so much that game can actually impact your rating, so putting so much stock into the result of that game, caring about it, and the impact it will have on your rating, which is going to be close to negligible in the long term, we're going to talk about that, that's very important, doesn't really make that much sense. It's pretty much, if you look at your overall rating trajectory over a however many year period, it's literally just one single dot here. We draw a line, it could be a dot here, it could go down and then it goes back up, right? And so while at the time you're so fixated on this single game, if you look over the span of a couple years, it just doesn't matter. And this might sound a bit hypocritical to what I just said, sort of putting down the people saying don't worry about your rating. Here I am kind of telling you don't worry about your rating, but there's a caveat to that. It's don't worry about your rating right now. On a 6 to 12 month period, you should definitely be worried about your rating at the very least if you want to improve, right? Because if your goal is to improve and at the end of say some 6 to 12 month period and your rating hasn't really gone at least in a slightly upward trend, then what you're doing isn't working, and you can't just sort of back away and be like, oh, I don't care about my rating if your goal to initially was actually to improve, because then you're just sort of in denial. So essentially what I'm saying is, it usually is going to take that period of 6 to 12 months. It's going to depend as well on how many games you're able to play and whatnot, but you really got to give yourself that sort of period to allow results to show. And if at the end of that period, stuff isn't working out for you, then it's time to reevaluate your training and change something up. And there's usually going to be two main reasons as to why you're not improving. And it's going to be either one, you're spending your time doing the wrong things, or two, you're doing the right things, but you're just not doing enough of them. Let's say you do calculation, you play some long games, but in total in a week, you only spend 3 hours doing that. Well, okay, depending on your level, that might be enough. But if you've gotten to a level where maybe 1600 or something and you do that amount of training volume and you're plateaued, you're probably going to need to do more so that you can improve. I think that's fairly common sense. But to really illustrate this sort of short-term versus long-term attitude between players, I want to show a comparison of rating graphs between two players, let's say player A and player B. Player A is red, player B is blue, who start at roughly the same level 1600, and let's say, you know, they both have this goal to reach 2000 elo, and we draw this timeline of 2 years. And player A, at the end of the 2 years, they see a slight rating increase, but more or less have been stagnated at the same level for most of this period, whereas player B has evidently ended up at a much higher level. Now, what was the difference between player A and player B? And again, this is completely hypothetical, but in this example, what I want to get across is, at the start, player B, and this isn't necessarily necessary by any means, I want to make that very clear, but this might be what you have to incur at some point if you really want to improve. You have to be, as player B was here, to take a bit of a rating hit. He took some, risks in certain games against maybe stronger players. He took a bit of a hit to his rating, but he was willing to do that because he understood that for long-term improvement, he just has to forget about his rating for now. He understood that, he just needs to focus on studying as much as possible. Of course, that his schedule allows for. I'm not saying you need to study like 10 hours a day if you like have a job and you're a dad or something like that, right? But he did as much as he could. Whereas player A kind of was like, I'm getting some draws against higher rated players right now. I don't really need to play for more. My rating's increasing right now. But eventually, because player A was too focused on increasing his rating right now, he couldn't learn the things and make the proper commitment to do the things that would actually increase his rating a lot more in the longer term, which is once again where all the big rating gains will come. And so around the 1 year mark, player B, he has had his ups and downs, but finally he's sort of taking over, leaving player A in the dust here, who at the 2 year mark is clearly way behind player B. And so to round out the video, I want to talk about my own sort of chess improvement journey, I guess you could call it, so to speak, and especially what went through my head when I was younger, because I think this will be helpful and add value for a lot of you guys, and you'll probably relate in the sense that I was obsessed over rating, as I've probably mentioned a couple times in this video. I would check my VA rating page a bunch of times each month, even though it doesn't even change until the end of it's shit like that, right? It's constantly on my mind. Every game I would play, I'm not sure every game, but a lot of games I would be thinking during the damn thing, I wonder how winning or losing is going to impact my rating. It's it doesn't take a genius to figure out that doing that during your actual game is probably not the thing that's actually going to benefit your chess, right? It's the thing, if you actually want to increase your rating, is focusing on the game in front of you, but 13, 14-year-old me didn't quite understand that apparently. But another aspect of I mean, that was at its worst, my very extreme short-term, I must increase my rating now sort of mindset. That was at its worst. In more mild forms, however, it was often taking form in the shape of me just offering draws out randomly to players who were a bit higher rated. Even if I had a better position, I was too scared to try and win, because I thought, it's better to get a draw and gain some rating points rather than lose and lose rating points. But again, it's you're only going to gain so much rating points from a single game or even a tournament. You're not going to gain even if you gain 100 rating points from one tournament, there's plenty of people who gain, and this happened to me, when I first got above 2000 FIDE, I gained 100 rating points in some big tournament that I just not big in the sense it was a national event or anything, it was just a club tournament, but I played really well. But in the next few months, I pretty much lost almost all of that and went to even a bit below what I was before. And that just goes to show you can't get too excited or even down if you lost 100 rating points, because I mean, you could just gain that back in the next few months anyway. It goes both ways, right? You shouldn't get too excited over losing gaining a lot of rating, and you also shouldn't get too down over losing a bunch. And okay, over the course of a year, if you've consistently been losing rating very gradually, that's probably not a good sign. But again, we're talking in the short term here. This is what a lot of people struggle with. And I went on a bit of a tangent there, but what I really wanted to say was when you prematurely, and that's the word prematurely I want to really focus on, accept or offer a draw, there's nothing inherently evil in accepting, or offering a draw if the position really there's nothing to play for. But if it's just a position where you can still play on, you might have a slight advantage, especially against a stronger player, and you're like offering or accepting the draw. Like, why? This is a learning opportunity. It's like you're training yourself so in the future, if you want to say, like, let's say this is a mindset I like to adopt. Let's say you are 1600 right now and your goal is to reach 2000. And you're accepting draw offers against 1700s all the time. Well, if you want to be like 2000 eventually, these are guys you're going to have to be beating. So why not use this, time where you're 1600 now and you don't have much to lose against these guys? Why don't you use this as practice as trying to beat these guys? Because, eventually if you're going to be 2000, you're going to have to beat them anyway. But anyways, that's enough sort of mindset talk, like let's show the actual game to really sort of show. And I mean, the actual chess itself, I guess, isn't that important, but, I was playing against this guy. This was back in 2016. I was 13 years old. I didn't know anything about chess. I had a FIDE rating of 1700 at the time of this game. A couple months earlier, I had a national rating of 800. I was going under this huge improvement surge. I made another video on, like, the two things which skyrocketed my rating to 1600. That video was talking a lot about this phase of my chess journey, again, you could call it. I'll probably make some more content on this, just since there's probably people out there who would find this quite informative and interesting. But nonetheless, even though I was improving a lot, I pretty much didn't know anything about chess strategy. I didn't play this game awfully, actually, from like a strategic point of view, but I honestly didn't know a whole lot. I was just winging it most of the time. My openings were terrible. I had no positional understanding. I could sort of do tactics, and that was what more or less kept me afloat a lot of the time. But otherwise, I struggled a lot. And in this tournament here, I was playing against a guy who, well, in this game specifically, I was playing against a guy who I forgot to mention was around 1900 FIDE. And somehow I got a very good position. I was thought about playing him. Don't know how, but I was. And then we eventually got to this position where, okay, I didn't play it most accurately in the next move. I had a big positional advantage here of black having this isolated E pawn. Probably knight's free and putting a piece on e4 was the way to go, maybe even a bishop there. And all in all, I mean, not only is this pawn isolated, but also this bishop's kind of shut off by it. So a very pleasant position for white. But unfortunately, okay, I played rook d7, and after rook f7, my score sheet ends here. I think my opponent probably took here and offered the draw. I don't think I would have offered it myself, but this is where the game ended, like king takes f7, draw. I'm slightly better because, once again, these factors I mentioned earlier. And I see this in some of my students' games as well. Sometimes they like accept the draw in a position where they're a bit better, or maybe even a lot better, and it's not because of the position, it's because of their opponent being higher rated. And I think it's just such a shame, because me playing out positions like this, and I'm not trying to be too hard on myself, I was 13 years old, I didn't have a coach to tell me that I was being an idiot for doing any of this, right? But this would have, just playing these sorts of positions out would have been such a good learning experience for me, and I'm really kind of think it's a shame that I didn't sort of fully appreciate that at the time. I was only interested in what can I do to increase my rating right now, which, as I mentioned for the 10th time in this video, is not what is going to bring the biggest gains in terms of rating. Focus on learning from these games that you're playing right now, not trying to milk the most rating points out of every single game possible, because in the long term, that's going to lead to stuff like this, where you prematurely accept draw offers, which, I mean, again, I just wish that I did less of when I was younger. It was really excessive. And one example I'm going to say was, this was a really extreme one. This was the same year. This was probably even just a couple weeks later, actually, to really illustrate like how down bad I was, right? Like, it was this 2016 under 14 Australian Junior Championships. This was my first time ever playing in some sort of like national junior event sort of thing. And I was playing this guy who was a bit higher rated than me. And eventually we got really deep into time trouble, and I was just a nervous wreck. I was like offering draws left and right. Eventually to the point where this is embarrassing to say, but I probably offered like 5 draws at the very least. And after the game, my opponent was kind of pissed. He's like, dude, stop offering that many draws. I was going to call the arbiter over or something. And at the time, I didn't even realize how annoying that, not only just like, is it just a weak mindset to have, but it's like annoying for the opponent if you're constantly offering draw. Like, one draw offer, it's not going to, piss the opponent off. But, if you did it to the extent that I did, keep that in mind a little bit. But I mean, really, I just wanted to say that to once again illustrate like how deep I was into like that fear of losing a game. I couldn't just chill out and be like, well, and I'm not saying you shouldn't care about the results of your games again. You should always do the best to try and win every game you play. But having this mindset of like, okay, well, if I lose, it's not the end of the world. I'm only going to lose X amount of rating points. I can come back from this and come back stronger. That is something that I did not appreciate at the ripe age of 13. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and you learned something from it. If you did, leave a comment down below, leave a like on the video, subscribe if you are not already. And also, if you're interested in coaching, go check that out in the description below. And if you're not signed up to my free newsletter, also sign up for that. I write weekly-ish articles on these sort of topics. But with that being said, I hope you guys all have a good day and I'll see you until next time.